Yeah, Raging Grace was sort of born out of fire, and no hyperbole there. It was one of those stories that required like a breaking of an old self to really kind of get down on page what felt true to me and my mother's experiences and my own, and you know what speaks to so many diaspora and immigrant experiences. And it kind of came about sort of the height of lockdown. It was 2020, a year of great chaos and enormous change. Yeah, I had reached a place where it was such an introspective year for a lot of us, and I just kind of figured that I didn't know who I was. I didn't understand exactly why I was doing what I was doing. And it started making me think about everything, like what my parents had essentially instructed me to do as I grew up, which was don't ruffle any feathers, get the good grades, just try your best to assimilate, and don't rock the boat. And I think what that ultimately did to me was made me be the injection mold good immigrant Asian, without any bevels or detail. And it made me reject my heritage and like my mother tongue. And when you realize that on your own and you figure out you're not anything or anybody, and you've just gone by what you think is good and what you think is cool, it's an incinerating kind of shame and leads to a weird anger. And this was happening at a time when there was a rise of Asian hate, both in the UK and the US. We had a government with an incredible toxic rhetoric towards immigrants. The same ones who were, propping up a very beleaguered NHS. The people who were dying at the front lines were Filipino nurses and doctors more than anybody else. And all of this combined, it was like a rage I'd never felt before. And it was getting to a point that it felt so dangerous, I had to do something about it, because I was just short of going outside and doing something stupid. So I put a lot of that into what is now Raging Grace. At the time, it was this really unwieldy thing that just gave me permission to just, put all my frustration and anger out. But to live in that space is so destructive. It's so corrosive, like to your soul and to your being. And I knew that the story had to get to a place of joy and celebration. And so I felt like the writing process for me was sometimes therapeutic, sometimes incredibly maddening. Like, why am I going through this? When it made me actually think of like this in primary school, they show you how a seed, you put it in like a glass jar with wet tissue, and this seed begins to break. And everything about it looks like it's breaking down, but what's actually happening is it's growing. And it took me a long time to realize, I think, that was what was happening. I think I'm still in that process. I thought writing this would be really healing, but I think it's this entire thing that's been surprising and in how it's made me feel and how much I know how much further I need to go. When it came to influences, I was watching a lot of Fanny and Alexander. There's a really weird gothic horror to it. I know it's not horror at all, but there are just these really tense moments that I really loved about it. Dirk Bogarde in The Servant, The Changeling, Danny DeVito's Matilda. I know that's a bit of a weird one, but there are moments in that's like genuine masterclass in tension building. And Bong Joon-ho's Shaking Tokyo, short film, 3 other directors who did accompanying shorts. And I just felt like I was watching someone at the height of their powers just commanding every shot. It was like economic cinema, which is what I needed, or which is what I knew Raging Grace had to be in production. Didn't have much money, and that to me was something I continued to watch throughout the process. But yeah, I was reading lots about just the movement of colonialism over the millennia, in many different forms, but especially of the past 500 years. Yeah, which helped shape dialogue, and the tone of it, and what is fizzing beneath the surface of this house, and everything that it represents. Trying to find the right joy was it was a process for sure, but it really started coming to life when we came across Max Eigenmann, and she was sort of put forward to us by our sort of co-producer in the Philippines, Darlene Malamas. And when I first saw her read, there was something about how she managed to capture both the drama and the sort of comedic elements of the film without either one undercutting each other, and I thought that was really powerful. Her delivery, I had everyone deliver that sort of monologue towards the end of the film, and there was just something about how she said some of those lines that were different to how I had imagined them being read. It was that difference to me that made me think, that she's grasping something about this character that is adding more than I have written. And that was one of the things that really kind of I felt very taken by. I had always thought for Mr. Garrett, he was weirdly somebody who I always kind of had very early on in the process, which was David Heyman. I saw a performance of his, it was just so powerful in how he delivered it. It was like incredibly eloquent. It was warm, but it had like a fire in it. There was that. But I saw him, a really small part in The Boy with the Striped Pajamas, and really quiet role, but it was so powerful. You saw this like really vulnerable David Heyman playing this character, and I knew that for the character I'd written, this is someone who could embody granddad vibes, like really strongly. Someone who you wouldn't mind putting all your trust in and felt really safe. And when you earn an audience's trust, which I know you can do incredibly well, you can do anything with them after that. So I just thought he was perfect for a Mr. Garrett. As you'll come to see, he's done such an excellent job. Catherine, who's played by Leanne Best. Oh man, I've got so much love for Leanne. She's such a fiercely intelligent person, very eloquent when she talks about a lot of the themes and, the message of what I'm trying to get across in the film, railing against colonialism, old and new white power. When I first met her online, she had just come back from like a really long shoot day. She was tired, but she made this effort to come on board at 9 p.m. at night and read through the lines. But it ended up being like a really long conversation just about all of the topics that I'd been researching, and that she was able to speak about so passionately and with so much fire. And I was like, oh my God, this person is perfect. And she delivered the lines, and I had like my producer just texting me on the side saying, do not offer her the part straight away. Because she could see in my face that I was like, this is her, this is the one. She was like, just wait. So it took all this strength for me not to be like, you're hired. But yes, she blew me away. Jaden, who plays Grace, one of the most emotionally intelligent people I've met, not just as a kid, but as a human being. I was supposed to shoot a short film with her in 2020, but obviously lockdown happened. And then when it came to finishing Raging Grace and we were looking for a Grace, she immediately popped into my head. But I thought, let's put the process out there. Let's try and find someone, just in case, we could find someone else right for it. We saw 15 other young girls, and she still managed to work her way all the way to the top. She just understood all the nuances of her character, you know, and what she was going through as a kid who just wanted to belong, but was feeling trapped by both, you know, society and the situation she was in, and by her mum, who's just trying to look out for her the best way she could. Yeah, she's just such a joy to work with, and I really, really hope that I get to work with her again, and that, you know, she has a bright future in acting if she ever decides to take it. Yeah. One of the things that I have genuinely lost sleep over, especially with the UK premiere coming out, is how audiences will respond to what I felt was very vulnerable for me to write, very critical, in ways that put on the experiences of people that have felt very badly hurt by the institution and the country that we live in. And I knew, because it had such a statement about white patriarchy, old and new white power, colonialism, which sits at the heart of, you know, UK and its history, which has in so many ways gone unchallenged in the public discourse in the UK. It was scary, really terrifying. I'm still terrified. Every time I go out on stage, I'm waiting for someone to challenge, and which is I'm perfectly happy to accept. What has been really surprising is the warmth of the majority of all the festivals I've been to, and the people that have come to watch it. Of course, there have been some people whose discomfort has been very interesting to see and unfold. And I think I'm learning how to not take responsibility for their discomfort, which has been a really bizarre journey for me. And I'm still learning so much as we go along. Despite how well it seems to be received by the public, there's still a lot of work that I need to do in terms of feeling the power of the film and the effect that it's had on an intended audience, the weight of responsibility that I feel, and the nervousness and terror that comes with it. Yeah, it's a lot, and I hope I can sort of find the strength to just feel confident with the message that I'm putting out there. Whatever anybody takes away from it is theirs to take away, whether they liked it or not. And it's trying to reconcile that what I've put out there is no longer mine. It belongs to the people who are watching it. And yeah, that's the process. I mean, film festivals for so many years have been they have been shaping cinema. They champion independent cinema and films and filmmakers in ways that the mainstream can't and don't. They're so important in sort of nurturing like the future and of filmmakers and you know, platforming and spotlighting voices that, you know, have something incredible to say. I feel like the way film festivals have had to survive is trying to find a balance between the studios and independent cinema, and that the balance at the moment is uneven, and I think it's beginning to hurt independent cinema in a way that is making things very, very difficult for a lot of filmmakers. But they have an enormous responsibility, like to continue the mission that they started off with. You know, like to try and find clarity in the muddiness of our industry at the moment and where we are. Like maybe it's more important than ever because of so much of what we're fighting for and the turmoil that we find ourselves in the world right now as a society. You know, we need cinema that says truths you know, in a day of like lies and, you know, hyperbole and, you know, manipulation, this is where people can come to find truth, like, and a sense of like freedom, like being set free. That's what cinema allows for. And, you know, film festivals are vital in that sense. And so I'm so happy, so, you know, for Edinburgh to have continued this year. Edinburgh were like the first film festival to essentially look at Rage and Grace in, you know, in a very wet clay form and see that this was something worth championing. And to be able to come back here essentially a whole year later and for it to be welcomed and celebrated, it's like, that's more than I can ask for.